Committee on Science, Space, and Technology have come to order. Say good afternoon to you and welcome to today's hearing entitled An Overview of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Budget for the Fiscal Year 2013. In front of your packets containing the written testimony, biography, and truth in testimony disclosure for today's witness, the Administrator of National Aeronautics and Space Administration, our friend Charles F. Bolden. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Mr. Bolden, I want to thank you always for taking time from your very busy schedule and appear before our committee. I understand you were with the Senate all morning, so you got to be real warmed up and ready to go over here for us. I realize a lot of work and effort goes into these appearances, and it takes time and takes your time, and we appreciate it. And I also understand that this makes this a very long day for you and your staff, and I thank you again. We're here today to discuss the President's 2013 budget for NASA, and the proposal essentially comes in at time spending levels as of this fiscal year, although when taking into account inflationary effects, the agency's purchasing power is slightly diminished. But given the tough fiscal times we're in, I think the agency's top-line request is reasonable. NASA's human spaceflight activities accounts for about 45% of the agency's budget, supporting the International Space Station, development of a new heavy-lift launch system, and development of commercial crew and cargo capabilities. I continue to be deeply concerned that the commercial cargo program schedule keeps slipping to the right. All of us understand how important commercial cargo is to our International Space Station. It's my sincere hope that both SpaceX and Orbital will complete successful demonstration flights later this spring, to be continued. A commercial crew gives me greater pause. However, I have yet to be convinced that a viable commercial market is going to emerge for human orbital missions other than NASA-funded ferry flights to and from the station. Yet NASA continues to subscribe to the theory that there's a sufficient market to sustain at least 2 commercial crew launch systems, and is putting large sums of tax dollars at risk to pursue this strategy. I hope my misgivings are wrong, but based on what I've seen to date, I'm not optimistic. I'm also troubled by NASA's inability to impose crew safety requirements on participants in the upcoming round of the commercial crew development program. The third phase, which will kick off this summer, funds participants under Space Act agreements to design fully integrated launch systems. While I understand that companies have every incentive to comply with NASA's safety standards, it's my strong conviction at this stage of design there should be no discretion about safety. NASA should have unfettered insight of the systems before companies begin actual production. Lastly, with regard to the human spaceflight program, I continue to be frustrated that the Space Launch System and Orion crew capsule are not being developed quickly enough. Current plans indicate that they won't be operational until 2021, which conceivably comes after the International Space Station is retired. SLS and Orion deserve higher priority. Should the Russians or commercial providers suffer any disruptions, we'll have no means of getting our crews to and from the International Space Station. Turning now to NASA's science portfolio. I'm generally pleased with the budget request, but do have issues with 2 related programs. NASA's decision to withdraw from the 2016 and 2018 ExoMars mission with the European Space Agency, the proposed reduction to the planetary sciences budget. For the last several years, both Congress and NASA have repeatedly expressed the desire to more fully collaborate with international partners to help defray the cost of future flagship missions. There's a growing acknowledgement from many quarters that NASA simply can't afford to go it alone. If we're to pursue ambitious missions that promise to do exciting things, NASA needs to engage and work with other nations to share in the burden of funding, building, and operating these very complex projects. ExoMars missions of high importance and visibility to the Europeans, and NASA, seemingly in good faith, agreed in 2009 to join forces with the European Space Agency. But with the unveiling of the 2013 budget, NASA has reneged on its commitment, forcing the Europeans to search for other partners if they hope to keep ExoMars alive. There's no doubt in my mind that NASA's decision to withdraw from ExoMars seriously imperils the ability of ESA to keep moving forward with this program. It also imperils NASA's ability to be viewed as a trustworthy partner on any future collaborations. The decision likewise flies in the face of the latest planetary decadal survey, which named Mars sample return as its top priority. It ignores the wisdom of our own community of scientists who labored hard to put together a well-reasoned roadmap. Speaking now about planetary sciences as well as Mars, I'm puzzled that NASA would choose to cut one of its most productive and successful science programs in this era of tough choices. Excuse me. Typically, good behavior is rewarded, but in this instance, it appears that NASA's successes at Mars, Saturn, and Mercury have garnered the opposite reaction. Mr. Administrator, I trust you'll take these concerns to the sober spirit in which they're delivered and convey them to the White House. We want NASA to succeed in all its endeavors, but we seem to disagree on how to best to achieve that goal. I now recognize my good friend and fellow Texan, Eddie Bernice Johnson, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall, and let me say good afternoon and welcome back, Administrator Bolden. Today might not be as smooth sailing as you'd like. But today's hearing is an important one to this committee because NASA is a critical part of the nation's research and development enterprise, as well as being a source of inspiration for our young people and a worldwide symbol of American technological proudness and goodwill. We need NASA to succeed. It also goes without saying that NASA's success will depend not just on the amount of funding it receives, but also on whether it is given tasks that are executable, policy direction that is clear, and a funding environment that is more predictable than it has been in recent years. Which brings me to NASA's Fiscal Year 2013 budget request. A request that cuts NASA's budget by about 0.5%. The good news is that the cut is only 0.5%, which can be taken as good news given the fiscal challenges the government is facing. On the other hand, I think that the important role of NASA plays in pushing innovation and in meeting daunting scientific and technological challenges argues for a bigger commitment to the agency than either the administration or Congress is currently making. I fear that years from now, we're going to question why we didn't recognize how important it is to maintain our investments in research and innovation and to continue to provide the means to inspire our young students even in challenging economic times. That said, NASA's constrained funding makes it doubly important for us to make sure that the budget request before us is one that is well constructed and sustainable. I know that NASA's Administrator Bolden has one of the toughest jobs in town and will argue forcibly in his testimony that it is. And I respect that. I respect the hard work, and I respect everything he's done to implement whatever budget he's given. Yet, as members of Congress, we have to take a hard look at the priorities in this budget and be convinced that they make sense. Based on what I've seen so far, I have to say that I still have unanswered questions about it. For example, this year's NASA budget request would cut NASA's planetary exploration program by over $300 million, a 21% cut. With more cuts in the out years, it is hard for me to believe that such cuts won't do significant damage to our planetary exploration program, a program that has been a highly successful scientific undertaking that has captured the imagination of people around the world. I want to know why such cuts are made and what, if anything, could be gained by making them. More broadly, I am puzzled by the de facto priorities contained in this year's NASA budget request. That is, this budget would cut funding for NASA's overall science program. It would cut funding for NASA's education program. It would cut funding for NASA's aeronautics program. It would cut funding for the operation of NASA centers and headquarters. And it would cut funding for the Space Launch System and the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle programs. Despite SLS and Orion being called out as an agency priority by NASA, and despite Congress's direction that they be available as a crew and cargo transportation backup capability if needed. On the other side of the balance sheet, funding for space technology would increase by almost 22%. And funding for NASA's Commercial Crew Program would more than double to almost $830 million. I can understand providing more funding to NASA's Space Technology Program. Investing in technology is an investment in the agency's future, and NASA's space technology funding has lagged in recent years. I have a lot more difficulty understanding the rationale for cutting all of the worthy programs I listed a minute ago in order to provide such a huge increase for the Commercial Crew Program. It is not because I have anything against the companies who are pursuing commercial crew contracts. I've heard them testify that they can be very exciting. Their enthusiasm is infectious, and I wish them all well. But as a steward of the taxpayers' dollars, I cannot let enthusiasm override the need for responsible oversight. Administrator Bolden, you are probably tired of hearing me ask the same questions year after year. But I still haven't gotten answers from the agency that would justify endorsing the course you're taking. For example, NASA still has not provided us with an independent cost and schedule estimate for the Commercial Crew Development Program, and we basically have to take it on faith that your budget requests are neither too small or too large, and that these vehicles will show up before it is too late for them to provide more than a year or two of support for the International Space Station. Neither has NASA provided us with a good estimate of what it will cost the taxpayer for NASA astronauts to make use of these commercial crew services. But we do know that in using NASA's own budgetary projections, the full cost per seat, when NASA's share of the development cost is factored in, is likely to be much greater than we are being charged by the Russians. That might be justifiable if the government investment was opening up large new markets. But as I said last year, so far the only potential non-NASA markets you have identified for Congress are super wealthy space tourists and non-U.S. astronauts. And I can't justify to my constituents the expenditure of their tax dollars so that the super rich can have a joyride. And finally, NASA has yet to provide a convincing explanation of why it is reversed course and scrapped its plan to use forward-based contracts that allow NASA to ensure that its safety and performance requirements are met for whatever systems it funds. I will not belabor the point, but Congress is going to need a lot more concrete justification than it has been given to date if we are to have confidence that the expenditures NASA is asking us to make would be money well spent. And so I know there'll be much to discuss today, Mr. Bolden, and I again want to thank you for being here, and I look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. And if there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. And before introducing our witness, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the hearing record at this point a letter dated March 7th, 2012, submitted by the Planetary Society. That's been agreed to between us. Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here, and I'm honored to get to introduce you again. Charlie Bolden serves as administrator of NASA, well known to members of the Science Committee, so I can be brief. He retired as a Major General from the United States Marine Corps after serving 34 years, many of them as a Marine aviator, and flew over 100 missions in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. During his 14 years as a NASA astronaut, Charlie flew 4 shuttle missions, commanding 2 of them. His flights included deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope in the first joint U.S.-Russian shuttle mission. President Obama nominated Charlie as administrator, and on July 17, 2009, he was sworn in. Charlie, it's good to have you here today. Thank you, and as our witness should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes, after which the members of Congress will have 5 minutes each to ask questions. Chair is able to provide some flexibility for you, understanding the hard day you've already had and the day you're probably expecting the situation is going to be similar. But I'm proud to turn the gavel over to you, Mr. Bolden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. Today it's my privilege to discuss the President's Fiscal Year 2013 budget request for NASA. All of us at NASA are very grateful to the Congress and especially to this committee for the strong level of support we continue to receive. Our requested budget, as has already been mentioned, is $17.7 billion, and it will enable NASA to continue to execute the bipartisan space exploration plan agreed to by the President and the Congress in 2010. Despite the constrained fiscal environment facing the nation, this request supports an ambitious civil space program that puts us on a path to achieving a truly exciting set of goals: to send humans to an asteroid and ultimately to Mars, and to broaden human activity in low Earth orbit. International Space Station assembly is now complete, allowing us to focus on full utilization of the station's research capabilities. NASA is operating a fleet of spacecraft to investigate Earth, the solar system, and the universe. All of this is critical to ensuring America's continued leadership in space exploration, as well as our stewardship of Earth. The Fiscal Year 2013 request supports the implementation of key priorities of NASA. First, American astronauts continue to live and work in space on board the International Space Station, conducting research to benefit life here on Earth and prepare us for deep space human exploration. NASA is committed to making this national resource available to a broader scientific and commercial research communities. We are also committed to ensuring that American companies launching from American soil transport our astronauts to their cargo to the space station. This year, we'll see the first commercial cargo flights to the International Space Station, and with congressional approval of the funding request, we're on track to have American companies transporting our astronauts to the station by 2017. Second, NASA is on track to develop a flexible deep space launch system that will ultimately be the most capable in history. The Space Launch System, or SLS, heavy lift rocket, and the multi-purpose crew vehicle Orion will carry American astronauts beyond low Earth orbit and into deep space within the next decade. We're pushing forward with contracting and design efforts to advance this crucial next-generation space exploration system. Our Fiscal Year 2013 budget request supports our plans for an uncrewed SLS flight in 2017 and a crewed test mission by 2021. Third, we propose to continue progress toward the launch of the world's most advanced telescope in 2018. The James Webb Space Telescope will operate deep in space to orbit the Sun and look out into space from its vantage point, nearly 1 million miles from Earth. Over the past year, NASA has made important adjustments to JWST management and put the project on a sound financial footing. NASA is confident that the FY13 budget request supports a 2018 launch for JWST. NASA's budget request supports a portfolio of innovative science missions, resulting in a stream of data from orbits around the Sun, Mercury, the Moon, the asteroid Vesta, Mars, and Saturn. We now have missions on the way to Jupiter, Pluto, Mars. 16 Earth science missions currently in orbit study Earth as an integrated system. The Hubble, Spitzer, Chandra, and Fermi space telescopes continue to make groundbreaking discoveries on an almost daily basis. Last year, the Messenger spacecraft entered orbit around Mercury. The Ebb and Flow satellites began mapping the gravity field of the Moon, and Juno launched last August, is on its way to Jupiter. However, tough choices did have to be made, so we will not be moving forward with the planned 2016 and 2018 ExoMars mission we had been planning with the European Space Agency. Instead, NASA is developing a new integrated strategy for Mars missions to ensure that the next steps for Mars exploration will support science and human exploration goals with advanced space technology developments. Our plan, including the framework for a mission to take advantage of the 2018 to 2020 launch opportunity, is targeted for completion, hopefully, in time to support the FY 2013 appropriations process. The FY 2013 request supports this approach, and it will be informed by extensive coordination with the science community and our international partners and, of course, the Congress. The FY 13 budget request continues to support robust Mars exploration, including 2 spacecraft currently orbiting Mars, the Opportunity rover on the surface, a multi-year exploration of Mars by the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity, and the planned 2013 MAVEN mission to explore Mars's upper atmosphere. The FY 13 budget request supports continued advances in new aviation, science, and space technologies, absolutely essential to enable NASA to achieve its ambitious goals. At the same time, NASA technology research seeds innovation, supports economic vitality, and helps to create new jobs and expanded opportunities for our skilled workforce. With the 2013 request, NASA will conduct aeronautics research to enable the realization of the nation's next-generation air transportation system, or NextGen, and the safer, more fuel-efficient, quieter, and environmentally responsible aircraft that will operate with NextGen. To inspire the next generation of scientists and explorers, and to foster the development of the U.S. workforce, NASA's education programs will focus on demonstrable results and capitalize on the agency's ability to engage students and educators. To help today's young people envision their future in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that's our goal. NASA is grateful to the American people and to you, their representatives here on this committee, for your continued support in these difficult and challenging times. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much for this opportunity to make these remarks, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, I thank you, sir, for your testimony. I'll remind members that committee rules limit questioning to 5 minutes, and if the chair will open, at this point, open the round of questions, the chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes, and I'll try to stay within the 5 minutes. I will stay within the 5 minutes. Charlie, NASA continues, we think, to ignore a provision in the 2010 Authorization Act to develop the Space Launch System and Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle in time to provide a backup capability to reach the International Space Station if the Russians or the commercial companies are unable to perform. Using NASA's very best case scenario, commercial crew capabilities will not be available any earlier than 2017, and the Space Launch System and Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle would not be operational before 2021. After the space station's current planned life. NASA has reduced the Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle budget by $200 million in this FY 2013 request. In the interim, what plans does NASA have in place to access the International Space Station should the Russian Soyuz or the commercial system be unavailable or not work for some reason?
Mr. Chairman, regretfully, as I think everyone here knows, that we have set ourselves up for a 2017 first availability of any capability beyond the Russians to take crews to the International Space Station. That is regrettable, but it's due to a lack of execution prior to now, and we're trying to correct that. I would say what is critical is that we not extend the gap between now and when we do have an American capability to get humans back into space any farther than it is right now. And that's why we're asking for the funds that we are to support the commercial crew development program.
In July or August, NASA's commercial crew program plans to give, I think, $300 million to $500 million to multiple companies using Space Act agreements instead of more typical government contracts. According to NASA's Office of General Counsel, Space Act agreements do not permit NASA to impose design or safety requirements on the contractors. I don't understand, how can we be assured that NASA is developing safe systems, and safety is so important, if it's prohibited from imposing any requirements or performance tests from the companies? And what recourse does the government have if these companies fail to perform or go out of business? And what, if anything, will NASA own after making these expenditures?
Congressman, the main recourse I have is that I picked the winner. My pledge to this Congress has always been that safety is foremost as long as I'm the administrator. While it is true that we don't have the opportunity to impose requirements and specifications under Space Act agreements, in response to continued prodding from the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, a panel empowered by this Congress, we have now developed a set of design requirements for a human-rated vehicle, as well as human rating standards for the same vehicles. And the industry companies, American companies, have participated in the development of those standards. So, and everyone has access to that now. So, whereas a year ago a company would have said, I'm reluctant to bid because I don't know what requirements you're going to impose upon me, that argument no longer holds water. Everyone has in their possession the design requirements for a human-rated vehicle that they will have to comply with when they enter into a contract. Everyone knows what the human rating standards are. So for minor things about human rating, they know what they are. So I have people who are working with the companies right now that can look at how they're designing and developing their vehicle, and we'll get a very good feel for whether or not they are serious about designing to those standards. They can't fool us. So I may not be able to impose the requirements yet, but they know what requirements they're going to have to meet once we enter into a contract with them.
Well, Charlie, why you have some control over the Office of the General Counsel, don't you? And they're subject to your suggestions, your demands, your requests.
Mr. Chairman, I do, but I don't have control over the law. And I don't have control over procurement regulations, and the job of my general counsel, and it is one that I respect dearly because he is a Marine and he is the world's greatest fighter pilot, formerly, and so I respect his opinion, and he tells me that I need not stray from procurement law, and I'm happy with that. And I assure you again, in all seriousness, safety is my number one concern, and I will make sure that we don't fly any American astronauts on any spacecraft if it's not safe and it doesn't meet our requirements.
But it seems to me that you ought to permit NASA to impose these safety requirements and have it in writing on the contractors, and that would give you more substance to take them on for us in our behalf.
Congressman,
why not do that?
You just used a key word when you said impose on the contractor. They're partners right now. They are not contractors, and it's a subtle difference, but it is a difference. When they become contractors, when we put a request for proposal out somewhere between 14 and 20 months after we go through this Space Act agreement process, they will bid on that proposal. They are then contractors, and once they sign on the dotted line, then they have hard requirements with which they have to comply. If we have any indication from our teams in their facilities between now and when a contract is let that they are not seriously approaching the standards that we need, they won't win the contract. I can say that up front. So if someone thinks they're going to, fool us, or say that they will put political pressure on us later because I have no other choice, they're sadly mistaken. We know, and they know. We know that they know what the requirements are. We know that they know what the human rating standards are.
My time's over, and I thank you so much. I may write you about that. Thank you.
I will make them comply.
Now I recognize Mrs. Johnson for her 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Administrator Bolden. You know as well as I know that NASA is a unique source of inspiration for our young people, and it really is distressing to see how the assessment of the value of NASA's education activities. Your total request for fiscal year 2013 is about $59 million less than you were appropriated by the Congress in fiscal year 2012. Now, I know that many people that are sitting here listening to you think, yay. But at the same time, fiscal year 2013 budget request for education is $36 million less than appropriated for fiscal year 2012. And I understand that you had to make difficult choices. Yet, with all of the puts and takes and the optics of education taking the lion's share of the agency's reduction just does not sit well with me. So how is it that during your priority setting, as Dr. Holden told us, education didn't stack up well against other agency programs or STEM education programs in other agencies? Could you elaborate on that?
Congresswoman, I won't comment on Dr. Holden's statement if he said that, but I would say education had to stack up well. Education is very important, it's critical, and what we are doing that's a little bit different than we've ever done before is one of the first things that I did when I came in was we had an education summit, and we brought in, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, we brought in 25 of the most expert people we could find in foundations and educational institutions to help us determine which direction we should go in. They recommended we form a design team to help us reform NASA's education program, and that's what we're trying to do now. There is also the President's desire is to more adequately collaborate among agencies so that we don't have duplication of effort, and that is under Dr. Holdren's leadership in the COSTEM, the Committee on Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And what we're doing is giving that collaborative organization an opportunity to set some goals for all of us, and I think we will meet. One of the things I mentioned is we have to be able to measure. I have to be able to get metrics that say my programs are effective. And I think in the end, we'll be able to do that, and you'll find that we are even more effective than we are right now.
Okay. Can you tell me where are you in terms of getting the measurements in place, you know?
We have been working for 2.5 years now to establish those metrics, and I think they are, the metrics are now well established, and we can have Mr. Melvin and his folk come in and talk about what they are, but we've tried to work them out with educational institutions and foundations, and so I think we have the metrics established. The measurement of those, as I think most people understand, is not something that happens in a week or a day or a month. We're talking about years in the making to be able to verify that your program was successful. But we do have measures from the Summer of Innovation program that is now getting ready to go into its 3rd summer that we have had a measurable effect on the interest of children, students, mainly in middle school. That was our focus. The interest of students in STEM education and following STEM courses, and we definitely have metrics that show that the effectiveness of our work with teachers is much better than it has ever been before. We now have teachers who proudly stand in front of a class and feel they know what they're talking about when they talk about math and science, and they're not afraid to teach it. Yes,
and I believe that, but I'm trying to figure out what did you give up by giving up this $36 million?
Well, Congresswoman, I think what we gave up was the number of different places that we would be able to reach, not the programs themselves. Leland and I had a discussion about this yesterday, and if you look at EBSCOR, or you look at Space Grant, the content is not affected. What is affected is the number of schools or the number of communities that we will be able to reach for some period of time, and we're trying to find ways to overcome that. I think NASA is now much better than ever in utilizing social media. So I don't have any statistics. I don't have any metrics to show this. My guess is we are probably reaching more students today, although we're spending less money and getting into fewer areas, than we ever reached before through Facebook, iTunes, apps. NASA has probably as many apps out there now that are available to students as anybody. And we didn't have that before.
Thank you very much.
Gentlelady, yield back. Recognize Mr. Sensenbrenner for 5 minutes.
General, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Trying to squeeze programs into whatever the President says you've got available, I know is a very difficult job, and you've got to pick some winners and losers. I know that programs talk about hardware and delivery systems and stuff like that. I'm kind of concerned about people, and we're all in favor of having more jobs available, and haven't done a very good job in that during the current recession. But delays in developing the new space shuttle program have resulted in the loss of about 10,000 jobs. And do you think the private sector will be able to absorb these 10,000 jobs as a result of increased reliance on the private sector, or are we going to be having some highly trained engineers who know a lot about developing spacecraft just go off into another area of endeavor?
Congressman, regretfully, the answer to that question is regional. If you were to ask me about Texas, we have had incredible success in placing our employees who have lost their job because the petrochemical industry has sucked them up. If you're talking about Florida, that is probably the area that is the hardest hit, and it's because we've been unsuccessful in working with the state of Florida to get them to bring high-tech jobs, alternative high-tech jobs into the area. But the Lieutenant Governor and I are working diligently to try to find companies that want to come into Florida and utilize the talent that we have there. So it's a slog. We're going to get there.
What's NASA doing to ensure that we don't lose these people forever?
Congressman, what we're trying to do, particularly with the NASA workforce, and unfortunately I have to differentiate between the civil service workforce and the contractor workforce, because I actually have very little control over the contractor workforce and what happens to them, other than going out and using more of our money to hire contractors instead of focusing on content to programs and keeping the civil service workforce. In the case of the civil service workforce, we're trying to do everything we can to retrain people where necessary, to make lateral moves so that we put them in the proper skill, the proper position to utilize their skills. And in some cases, in my visits to the centers, I'm asking people to come in and say, hey, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. I think I would be better at doing this, and asking for a move into another field if they think there's something else they can do.
Now, we spend about $3 billion a year on the space station. We have 2 astronauts up on the space station now, which I think is probably the most expensive jobs program in the universe. Mrs. Johnson has complained about some changes. How about reducing the space station budget and perhaps reducing the $1.5 billion per job that we create up there?
Congressman, I would disagree with you in your assessment that it's an expensive jobs program. The space station program is not a jobs program at all. The space station program is the most incredible technological achievement of this nation and the world. And I would refer anybody to not just to NASA's website, but to the website of any of our other 4 international partners. This document, which shows
what proportion do they pay, the partners pay for the
every
space
partner
station?
pays a proportional amount. Russia and the United States paid the lion's share because only we know how to build spacecraft the way we do. But every partner is required to put in a certain amount, and there is no exchange of funds. So let me make sure everybody understands that. We work with our partners on a barter arrangement. So we may get a spacecraft from them for an opportunity for one of their astronauts to fly, or we may get some other component from them for some service. But there is no exchange of funds.
Okay, I have one more series of questions relative to the James Webb Space Telescope.
Yes, sir.
That currently has a cost overrun of 900%, and that's shameful and that's shocking. What would happen if we said we weren't going to give you any more money on this, and you're going to have to do with what's on the baseline? And my second question, and this is not facetious, is that telescope going to be strong enough to see the bottom of the financial hole that we've dug for it?
Congressman, I would say, first of all, James Webb has the potential to expand our understanding of our universe many times more than the Hubble Space Telescope has done. And we never dreamed of what Hubble would do. I don't think you can put a financial price tag or a value on the incredible achievements of the Hubble Space Telescope. I don't think you can put, if I were to go through the benefits in this document and try to put a dollar value on it and divide it by the number of people who have worked on the International Space Station program in the 12 or so years we've been flying, I think you'd be marveled at the small cost per person to do this. So I don't think we can attach financial value to this, unfortunately, because we're talking about life-saving drugs. We're talking about medical.
Well, I know about all of that, but one thing I've experienced in the 30 years that I've been on this committee is that NASA always seems to have cost overruns on everything, and with the James Webb Telescope, it's 900%.
Congressman, if I were to show you instruments or satellites such as Juno and Grail, which are, Juno is on its way to
You're
Jupiter,
dodging around
right
the
now.
question
Sir, I'm
about the
gonna
Webb Telescope.
Since I became the NASA administrator, and I did not do this, by the way, this started in 2009 before I became the administrator, NASA adopted a process called joint cost level. We're looking at cost and schedule, and we are making sure that we can guarantee an 80% probability of success on missions. Juno, Grail, Maven, other projects that have been conducted in my time as the NASA administrator have no cost overruns. In fact, some of them have underrun their cost estimate. All of them have been delivered on time. The James Webb Space Telescope, in the last year and a half, since we brought our replan to this Congress and got it approved, James Webb is on target. Every milestone it was supposed to reach except one has been reached on time. That one was deferred because we needed to do that for another reason, not related to our ability to do it. Cost is on cost. So I think we have adopted a new way of pricing that makes us much more attendant to cost and schedule, and I don't think you're going to see the overruns that we have historically had.
I thank the chair.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Miller, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bolden, there are obvious ethical concerns with revolving door government. Some of those have to do with the appearance of impropriety, and sometimes the conduct goes beyond the appearance of impropriety. The ethical concerns behind the Procurement Integrity Act seem pretty evident. That prohibits former federal officials who oversaw certain procurements from going to work for the contractor that they gave those contracts to, from getting paid by the very folks that they've given business to. And those apply to all procurements above a certain dollar value, but apparently not to all kinds of contracts, including apparently the Space Act agreements. And NASA is using Space Act agreements extensively in the acquisition of commercial crew capabilities. There are hundreds of millions of dollars involved, and it seems to be important to the integrity of the agency that Congress and the American people have the ethical expectations that the Procurement Integrity Act is designed to protect for the acquisition of commercial capabilities. Is it correct that the post-employment restrictions of the Procurement Integrity Act do not apply to Space Act agreements for those acquisitions, for those procurements? And if they don't, do you think Congress should make them apply?
Congressman, I cannot answer that question, and I will get you an answer for the record.
Okay. Well, you may have difficulty with the next question too, because it's along the same general lines. Your policy directive 1050.1L, which deals with the use of Space Act agreements, says that funded agreements may be used only when the agency's objective cannot be accomplished through the use of a procurement contract, grant, or cooperative agreement. NASA has decided, however, to use Space Act agreements for the commercial crew acquisition. That appears to be a reversal of the earlier decision to use contracts that did have the restrictions. Can you explain that decision?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and is your rationale consistent with your policy directive limiting the use of those agreements?
And Congressman, I won't ask you to read it for me again because I don't remember all that you said, but But the simple explanation for the reason that I went from my plan, the acquisition strategy, to enter into a contract to put out a request for proposal for commercial crew was the fact that the 2012 appropriation from the Congress was half of what we had explained to the Congress we would need to conduct a viable commercial crew program. The GAO and other oversight organizations came to the Congress and came to me and said, we think you need to relook at your acquisition strategy because we don't think you can do what you said you can do. And I agreed with them reluctantly. And so in order to maintain competition, in order to give more companies an opportunity to participate in the production of a system, not an individual vehicle like we did through the commercial crew, the earlier program that we had, my decision was that we would prolong the period of time utilizing Space Act agreements where we would continue to partner with industry and not go into contracts. If I had to enter into a contract, if I had to submit a request for proposal in February as I had planned, at $406 million, I would have had to select one contractor, and the subsequent cost on that contract would, I think, I would not have been able to afford it. And so that was the basis for my decision to extend the period of time that we were utilizing Space Act agreements.
Well,
it may have been legal to do so, but it would not have made sense. It would not have made financial sense.
But the traditional procurement law requirements that the Space Act agreements get around don't apply. I've just talked about one of them, the revolving door concerns. What are the concerns what are the provisions, the safeguards that drive up cost? And
Congress, I just have to ask. I'm confused because the implication is that we have selected a company that is violating the revolving door rule, and I don't know of any. So I mean,
well,
if you're asking me to justify why we selected a company that has someone who was involved earlier in the decision to do Space Act agreements, I'd be glad to answer that question. But I don't know whether you're dealing in a hypothetical or whether you're alluding. What you're implying is that we have violated the law.
All right, you seem to have gone to view some of the restrictions that appear to have good sense behind them, those are a problem, and they might drive up costs. I'd like to know why they're a problem. Should they perhaps not apply to any contracts, or if there is in fact good sense behind them, why aren't they applying to these contracts?
Sure. The problem with going with a contract at $406 million is that I would only have one company to be awarded a contract if they would be willing to accept a contract at that price. I don't think I could have I may have found one company. The one thing I do not want to find the situation I do not want to find myself in ever again, or my successor, is where there is only one alternative to taking humans to space without going to a foreign entity. I would like to have, and my purpose in stretching this out is to hopefully have at least two American companies, not two alternatives, Russia and an American company, but two American companies who can provide transportation to low Earth orbit.
I understand my time has expired. You said you would get back to me on whether the Procurement Integrity Act revolving door provision should apply. Please do.
Yes, sir, I will.
All right, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Palazzo, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Administrator, for appearing here today. My questions today are offered in the context of my continued frustration that NASA seems to be an agency without a clear mission. As we wrap up the shuttle program and send the orbiters to museums, we so too lose expertise and a skilled workforce to other opportunities. It is sad that some of those opportunities are outside of the aerospace industry. Meanwhile, our access to the ISS is limited to the Russians, a reliable partner, but not without concerns after this last fall's launch mishaps. And I wonder what our European partners feel about our future human programs when they see our schizophrenic nature in mission planning. After 50 years of leadership in human spaceflight, this heralded agency faces the question of what's next. It's my commitment as chairman of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee that we come together to advance common worthwhile goals and protect America's legacy of space leadership. Having said that, I would like to ask you a few specific questions. Mr. Administrator, I'm extremely pleased with the critical role the Stennis Space Center has in support of SLS, COTS, and CCDEV, but I want to make sure those investments are comparable to the investment in resources and infrastructure at the Kennedy Space Center. Stennis's role is prior to flight, and there seems to be a disparity in investment. Can you speak to that?
Congressman, Stennis is playing a critical role right now, and they are doing something that the Kennedy Space Center is not doing, and that's test firing on a routine basis. We have quite a bit of activity going on at Stennis, and that required us to make investments in upgrading the test stands, and I think we are doing that. We have been able to attract not only interest from the traditional engine manufacturers, but now some of the newcomers. So I think our investment in Stennis is doing exactly what we want to do and bringing benefit to the area in terms of testing that we're doing.
Okay, so the concern is that the investment in Kennedy is not going to get so far ahead because there is some additional investment that needs to go into Stennis for the 21st century launch complex.
Congressman, you heard me say once before when we were both together for the anniversary at Stennis, and I didn't make this up. I've heard it. All roads to space lead through Stennis. And that is a true statement because we don't fly an engine that hasn't been tested at the Stennis Space Center. So my development of test stands or my upgrade of test stands has to pace the development of the vehicles that we're planning to fly at Kennedy. So 21st century launch facility, the exploration ground systems, we're trying to pace all of that such that we end up with a system, all of its integral parts coming together at the same time. I think you're very aware. J2X is something that, while we won't need it for a number of years, we're trying to get some testing behind us on the J2X. If I weren't worried about that, I'd say, okay, let's hold off for a few years before we test J2X. I don't think that'd be prudent because, we probably would not be able to find any problems that we may have with it, and it would not be ready when we need it. So I think the answer to your question is we are trying to pace the improvements, the construction, and the development at all of our centers such that everything keeps pace and comes together. In the case of SLS MPCV in 2017, when we fly our first uncrewed launch.
So parallel paths.
Yes, sir.
Same point.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, I've seen in the news media reports that NASA is making investments in other agency rocket test stands at the expense of the agency's primary rocket test facility at Stennis. Are you approving those investments at other centers?
Congressman, I am not aware of an investment that we're making in another agency test stand. I will take that. I'll take that for the record.
Plum Brook, $150 million investment. That is our test facility,
Right.
and that investment is one of long standing. This is not a new budget item or a new investment. It has been ongoing, and we are just trying to make sure that Plum Brook is ready when it's time to take, whether it's Orion or any other vehicle there, that it will be ready to test.
So you don't think that's a duplication of test facility?
No, they're totally different. Plum Brook and Stennis. Plum Brook is a vacuum. It's a chamber that we can simulate conditions in space for a vehicle itself, whereas Stennis, as you know, is a facility where we simulate the operating conditions of an engine. So totally different.
Mr. Administrator, I appreciate it. My time's expired. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Edwards, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Johnson and General Bolden. Appreciate your being here as well and for your leadership. I know that today we're focused on the long-term goals and space flight missions beyond Earth and NASA's activities to develop the capabilities of the program. And I do want to highlight and appreciate the breath of life that's been breathed into the work at Goddard Space Flight Center on Earth science missions and the continued work with the James Webb Space Telescope. And unlike some of my colleagues, I really do see a value in James Webb. and to my friend over in the Senate who breathed life into the James Webb Space Telescope in the appropriations process when some on the other side, frankly, wanted to zero it out entirely. But I do have some concerns about Goddard's budget and the reduction of $180 million this year. And it's not specifically about Goddard, but it goes to the question of the priorities for the agency and your overall vision and strategies. I'm concerned when I look at the budget and it proposes increased fundings for ground support systems without a completed design for a commercial vehicle. It bucks the recommendations of a decadal survey by ending the ESA, the European Space Agency partnership for planned Mars missions in 2016 and 2018, and it doesn't follow through on the authorization that was passed in 2010. This creates an atmosphere, I think, of great uncertainty certainly by members of this committee about our ability to maintain U.S. leadership in a number of the areas that we've pioneered. And so to that point, I look at every program in your budget, and it seems to take a hit except for the commercial crew. And in that one request, it's $829 million, more than double what's been appropriated for fiscal year 2012. 2/3 more than what's authorized for 2013. And according to your staff, if NASA is not appropriated at the requested level and instead receives something close to last year, it'll slip the operational date for commercial services to 2018. I wonder if you can tell me how we can expect support on this committee for a 104% increase when you've yet to provide to us, despite being asked numerous times, frankly, General, a credible cost and schedule estimate that justifies an annual funding stream lending to the operational date that you've indicated. And I wonder if you also could tell us why you don't have plans any longer to have an independent cost assessment and schedule estimate done, despite assurances that you've made last fall that one would be done. And if that's true, I wonder why you're abandoning it. And then lastly, going to the acquisition strategy, I wonder whether you permit NASA's safety requirements and that you've considered risky by your own staff, how you can project with any confidence that the astronauts will be able to fly safely on a commercial spacecraft to the International Space Station by 2017. And I know that's a lot to take in, but it does raise some concerns with me anyway about projecting goals and costs for something that we haven't even proven yet. And if that's true, why do we need to spend that money for 2013? It seems to me we need to get something that's more of a sure shot from you before we authorize spending levels when we're cutting in other critical parts of the agency and the agency's mission. Thank you.
Congresswoman, when we made the initial assessment of what would be required for a commercial crew program, we did a number of things. We went to industry and asked them themselves, which I understand. You know, it's going to the hen, sending the fox to the hen house, some say. But we did get independent assessments of whether or not that was reasonable, and the estimate that we originally brought in for $850 million was something that was supported by people that said, if you want to have a commercial crew capability by 2016, then you need $850 million. And I think.
Did you say you got that independently from the industry? I'm so confused.
No, ma'am. I said we got estimates from industry. I think, you know, the Augustine Committee got the original estimates from industry. The Aerospace Corporation took a look, and I would get back to you on what other entities we had looked, but $850 million was the estimate that we had for bringing in a viable commercial crew capability by 2016. When we testified last year, not just me, but Bill Gerstenmaier and others, we said if we are allocated less than $850 million, it will cause the program to move to the right. We didn't know how much, but we estimated that if we went down to I think the number at the time was if we go down to $500 million, which we called a floor, then that's going to push the program out to no earlier than 2017. So that's where we are today. We're at 2017. The reason we're asking for the $829 million is because we do not want to see it go to the right anymore. The gap between now and 2017 is excessive. A gap that increases would be unacceptable, and that's the reason we came back and asked for a restoration of funds for the commercial crew program.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know my time has expired. I have to tell you, General Bolden, I don't know how you can really legitimately make those estimates when it doesn't seem to me that there's a real plan yet. And so I hope we're not going to be coming back to this committee another year from now and saying, you know what, it's not $829 million because we've had some other things that we have to consider, and we have something more real that's a deliverable from the industry. I think that's very problematic. Thank you. And
Congresswoman, I will take the action to get with you and your staff to make sure that I understand, what you mean when you're asking for a plan and the cost for that plan, because I think we have that, and I think we know where we're going, and I think we know how much it's going to cost. So I'll take the action. I'll take it to get with you on that.
Gentlelady yields back. Recognize Ms. Adams, lady from Florida, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that NASA has requested $41.1 million in the 21 CLC line and space operations. There seems to be some confusion about how much money is being directed to the ground ops overall. Can you explain how much money is being spent out of the space exploration, space operations, and CECR lines for ground ops and modernization projects?
There's
about specifics, dollar amounts, that'd be great.
I'll get you the exact number, but I think it's about $504 million for ground operations. But we, in order to try to be clear to the Congress and make it easier, we call ground operations 21st Century Launch Complex, and that's for mostly for commercial crew and other assets. And then we have what we call exploration ground systems. That is for SLS. So the bulk of that money goes to exploration ground systems. 47 million of it is for 21st Century, which is for modernization and upkeep that makes modernization, not upkeep, for modernization and transformation that makes Kennedy a flexible facility for use of commercial and SLS. So that piece is confusing because it does serve SLS and other users. Exploration ground systems is strictly SLS, and that's where the bulk of it is.
So I look forward to getting those exact numbers from you. My understanding is also that Orbital Sciences is ready to launch, but their pad in Virginia is not ready for them. Is this true, or are there other problems that you would like to share with us?
All I can tell you, Congresswoman, is what the contractor tells us. We do know that the lack of a launch pad is one problem right now for Orbital. I am not able to say that they could launch today if they had a launch pad. So
is Kennedy Space Center in danger of similar issues, or does NASA have the resources needed to be prepared to launch when the time comes?
The reason that we want to spend money now on ground systems, as I have explained to some of your counterparts who are more concerned about the vehicle, is, as I told Congressman Palazzo, we're trying to work everything on a parallel path so that we all get to the same date.
So the question is?
No, ma'am, we are not going to run into the problems at Kennedy that we are facing at Wallops. But and for different reasons, though, and I can go into that with you later, but totally different
I have a couple
operation.
more questions, and I don't want to get filibustered because I want some answers.
Yes, ma'am.
The price tag for James Webb is now up to $8.8 billion with a B. Essentially, NASA is cannibalizing everything in science except climate change research and earth science, which was untouched, to pay for the James Webb. The James Webb Telescope is supposedly an international partnership. Can you tell me how much funding of our international partners has been contributed to this project, given our $8.8 billion investment, not including the launcher, which NASA gave away to a foreign country?
Congresswoman, first of all, I would disagree that we have cannibalized the science program for James Webb. That is not accurate nor true. And the other thing is that the international partners, as I mentioned with International Space Station, contribute
how much?
In kind. They don't give dollars. They give instruments. The launch vehicle is an Ariane spacecraft, which if you compared that to the price of an Atlas, it's $450 to $550 million. So it's a contribution in kind.
It's in kind. But you will agree that the climate change research part has not been changed.
Congresswoman, I would say that we have not funded climate change, earth science, to the level that it should be funded for what we need to do to respond to the nation's needs.
General Bolden, I know you have not yet responded to the March 5th letter from our colleague, Appropriations Subcommittee Chairman Frank Wolf, about discussions among the International Space Station partners to include China in the program. However, I would like you to respond to the concerns raised by Lieutenant General Ron Burgess, the Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, about how China's space warfare activity is carried out under the guise of China's civil space program. Have you been briefed by the DIA or CIA on China's espionage activities to gain American space technology, especially through cyber hacking? Are you concerned about China's collection efforts against NASA engineers, scientists, and your contractors?
Congresswoman, first of all, I will just correct, for the record, Congressman Wolf and I had a long conversation yesterday. I told him I did not want to send him a letter when I could talk to him and explain what happened at the heads of agency meeting. So that meeting has been had, and he considered that adequate response to his letter. I am continually informed by members of the intelligence community. I get briefs all the time. I go and read what's called a read book for me that contains classified information about all of our partners and non-partners and their intelligence activities. So I am aware of what's going on.
Are you concerned?
Anyone who is not concerned about what is going on with our partners and our non-partners would be foolish. Everyone wants our technology. Everyone wants our technology. So we need to be.
Yes?
We need to be. I am concerned.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Recognize Mrs. Fudge, lady from Ohio, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Johnson. Good afternoon, Administrator Bolden.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
I was pleased to see that Glenn Research Center is well positioned in your request for conducting cutting-edge space technology work in FY 2013. With the planned engagement of almost 140 FTEs and with a center distribution of over $120 million requested in FY 2013, I am certainly confident that Glenn will answer the call. In particular, I note that Glenn will be leading one of the Big 9 space technology projects, specifically cryogenic propellant storage and transfer. Stepping back a bit, I'd like to give you the opportunity to explain to members why it is so important to make investments in space technology and what NASA will benefit by doing so.
Congresswoman, this is a joke. No. I'm going to make a joke referring to Congressman Rohrabacher. Your question is incredibly timely. I was going to ask Congressman Rohrabacher if he would like to provide the response, because we spent about an hour and a half together yesterday, my explaining to him our efforts in cryogenic propellant storage, the importance of doing that as a technology pursuit, the fact that it is the #1 priority of my technology program, my space technology program. While it is not vital for us presently, we have to be developing that capability to support the heavy lift launch vehicle when it comes available. We'll need that capability if commercial companies want to. If they want to pursue ventures beyond low Earth orbit someday, as they may, we need to have the capability to put propellant depots in space, and we can't do that today. We don't have the capability because we need big thermos bottles, let me put it simply. We don't know how to do that. So that's what the program you're talking about, and that's the work that Glenn will do, simply.
Thank you. Now, I'm concerned about the 5% cut to funding institutional needs in support of NASA centers and headquarters. It seems that this account had taken more than its fair share of cuts over the past 2 years. What impact will this latest proposed cut have on the center's abilities to address increasing needs and requirements, and on the civil servant staff's ability to meet challenging expectations?
Congresswoman, these are very difficult fiscal times. I know you know that as well as anyone. We're really trying to tighten our belt. You will hear people complain about cuts in travel. we do, every time you take money away from a center, it impacts. But we are trying to make sure that they're smart reductions. So we're looking at reductions in paper usage, in pencils, in travel, and we're trying to make sure that we don't get any muscle, as we do the reductions that are required, trying to live within our means with the budget that we have.
Okay. Lastly, certainly I was disheartened to see that the President's request for and this may have happened earlier and I was late, forgive me if I'm being repetitive, but I was disheartened to see that the President's request for education at NASA reflected a $36 million decrease. Last week, my office met with the Ohio Space Grant Consortium, and we heard about how NASA's education dollars are impacting the lives of students and encouraging them to pursue careers in STEM fields. It seems to me that the space grant and other education programs at NASA are unique in their ability to inspire our nation's youth. Can you explain the justification behind the reductions to these programs?
Yes, ma'am. We had to establish priorities, and we had to decide where we were going to take reductions, and we did it essentially across the board. But what we have done with education, as with a number of other programs, is we have looked at new ways of doing what we did. As I mentioned earlier, I think if you would ask the space grants, have they increased their reliance upon social media that they get help from us in doing? They may not be able to reach the numbers of communities or the numbers of schools that they did before, but my guess is they are reaching more students because they're doing it by a different means now. So we are taking an education design team to try to tailor our education efforts. We are putting we're putting oversight of our expenditures on education from the centers and the programs that have their own independent education and outreach funds. We're trying to synergize it such that we spend that money more wisely, and we don't have different centers doing different things that when you look at them in total, everybody's doing the same thing but spending it from a different pot of money. So we're trying to be smarter in the way that we reach students. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, when we look at a program such as the Summer of Innovation, which is going into its third and final year of the pilot, we'll find that the metrics that we establish verify that we have, in fact, had a greater impact on reaching middle school students, although we didn't do it the way we have traditionally done it. The space grants were not involved in the types of programs that we are doing in the Summer of Innovation, and now in many states they are the implementing organization. It was hard for them. They don't like doing that because they love being at the college and graduate level. But we told them, you've got to go down and work with middle school kids, and they're doing that. And we're reaching students and teachers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bolden, I think you responded to most of my questions already, either when I was out of the room or in the room, one way or the other. I just want to run over a couple real quickly, and then I have a couple of new ones as well. I understand that the James Webb Space Telescope is on schedule, both in regard to resources and timing, and that's fully supported by the administration. Is that the case?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. There's no possibility it'd be before 2018, would it?
Congressman,
it's one of the most important things we could possibly do, but maybe there's no way to speed it up. I don't know.
That is one that an infusion of funds
would help.
Now would help. But
okay.
If we wait years and
right.
say we'll increase the funding, it won't make a difference.
Understand. Also, I understand that you feel ASAP's concerns have been addressed as well.
I do.
Okay. On the space launch system, does the administration fully support it? There's been a slowdown in the past, and that led some of us to wonder about the seriousness of purpose.
Congressman Smith, the administration fully supports the space launch system and Orion, and as a demonstration of that support, we have, as I mentioned earlier, we are test firing the J2X, which is an upper stage engine. We have moved all of the shuttle main engines over to Stennis for further testing and modification. We're actually doing hardware things now that we were not doing this time last year.
Okay. And in response to Congresswoman Adams' questions a few minutes ago, I assume that China is not being considered as a partner with the International Space
China is not by the United States. And as I explained when asked at the heads of agency meeting, I am complying with the law and that I am not allowed to do any bilateral activities with China.
Okay.
And we are not.
I mean, their space program is a thinly veiled cover for, I think, other purposes, and I think we're aware of that too. Another question is this: NASA, as NASA begins to plan for the first in a series of deep space missions, what studies are underway to better determine the impact on the health of the astronauts themselves? International Space Station astronauts have had trouble with their vision. There have been other problems as well. What kind of studies are being conducted that will anticipate or try to address those kinds of health
Congressman,
challenges?
we have an ongoing human research program that looks at astronaut health and has helped us to improve the condition of astronauts as they spend 6 months on the International Space Station. We have continually tried to get funding, unsuccessfully, for a long-term health program for astronauts after they leave the program, because what we're finding now is that there are long-term effects of space flight that we will only find out about if we have access to the medical records. When someone leaves the astronaut office, participation in the longitudinal study program, as I do, is voluntary, and most people don't do it because they've got to go pay for the doctor's visit or medical treatment. If we had a program whereby I had lifetime access to an astronaut, their health, and their medical records, it would benefit people, future space flight.
Is anything being done to specifically address the
vision problem?
Yeah, vision problem of the astronauts?
We have, what you're talking about is increased intracranial pressure that causes flattening of parts of the eye. We don't fully understand it.
Nothing can be done to prevent it that you're aware of?
We don't know. It is a question yet to be, it's an answer yet to come. We hope so.
Okay. Last question. The Atlas V has proved itself, 100% success rate and so forth. The real issue for the commercial crew is the lack of a capsule or crew vehicle to put on top of the rocket. Why wouldn't we just save ourselves a lot of time, perhaps a lot of money, decide on the Atlas V, and then we can go forward with and focus on developing the crew vehicles?
Congressman, what we're doing is we are buying a service that requires a complete integrated system. And I think what you've seen is that a number of the potential bidders have chosen the Atlas V, and they are working, and we have funded to a certain extent as a partner ULA, the company that provides the Atlas V, to find ways to human rate that launch vehicle. But the launch vehicle itself is just a piece of the puzzle. We need a launch vehicle and a crew capsule, and then when you talk about deep space exploration, you need a service module and other things, so they all come together. And
that's my point. We ought to be focusing on those latter developments rather than spending so much time trying to figure out what's the best vehicle to use. Why not use the Atlas V? Just make that decision right now.
Because every person that produced a module doesn't want to use an Atlas V.
Okay. Well, that's up to you all too.
No, that's actually up to the contractor, to the private industry. What we asked them to do was bring us the best system, and we're looking, I think in response to a question earlier, we are trying to give industry a reasonable amount of time, not forever, but a reasonable amount of time to put their plans together and do testing that we can observe and make sure that they're going to meet the standards, the safety rate requirements, and the human rating standards that we have set forth, and they know what they are. We're past where they didn't know what they were. They know.
Thank you, General Bolden. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bolden, I just wanted to begin by saying that I was pleased to see that in a year that we've been forced to make tough funding decisions, your FY13 budget request for aeronautics R&D programs prioritizes safety in next gen, which I think are critically important. Despite some concerns that I have about cuts to fundamental research, this budget does try to remain true to NASA's aeronautics mission. And I know that oftentimes that A is forgotten. In the first A in NASA is aeronautics, with all the focus on space. But I hope, I'm happy to see what is in this budget generally for aeronautics, and want to hope that we continue to you continue that focus, and that Congress will also continue to fund that. Now, I wanted to move now to your plans regarding the commercial crew integrity capability, and what is going on with that. There are a few questions about that earlier about the safety issues and how you're dealing with that. And as you said, once the design is selected, it will be held to NASA's safety requirements. What I'm concerned about is what are the contingency plans you have if none of the designs that result from the CCI cap meet these requirements? Are you going to be, as the plans evolve, is NASA going to be doing any review of the design plans to ensure that this does not happen? Getting to the point where we're expecting, we've put the funding into these, we have been expecting that these are going to come through, and then nothing does meet the design doesn't meet the safety requirements. So what is NASA doing to prevent that from happening, getting stuck in that spot?
Congressman, what we've done is we have made available to anyone who is interested in even considering potential bidding on a commercial crew system, we have provided them with the vehicle design requirements for a commercial crew vehicle. They have that in hand. We have also provided them with human rating standards. And so that there is no question about whether they're reasonable or not, industry helped us to develop those requirements and standards. And in some cases, they had standards that were even more stringent than ours. When that was the case, then we said, okay, you can use the NASA standard or you can stick with your own company standard. So it's NASA standard or better. And they know what that is, and our thought is that they will design to those standards and those requirements as they go through this 14 to 20 month interim period before we release a request for proposal.
So then, because that is out there, you expect that the plans will meet the standards, so that when you get to the end, you will have that.
Congressman, hope is not a plan, and which is what you're implying, and I am not. My plan is not hope. We have put what we call a PIT team, partner, and I have to read it. It's called a partner integration team, and every viable vendor that we think stands a reasonable chance of submitting a proposal for commercial crew, if they request it, we provide to them at their cost a PIT team that comes from the Johnson Space Center, Marshall, anywhere they ask, that acts as not as consultants, but just to observe what they're doing, and it's a team that they can say, would NASA do it this way? And the results that we're seeing from the PIT teams, both the reports that I get from Ed Mango and his commercial crew program people, but most especially the comments that I get from CEOs of companies that say, this is good. It is great having NASA team in my facility looking at my work and at least telling me that I'm headed in the right direction. They won't tell me everything I want to know, but they are telling me I'm headed in the right direction. So that's given us an increased level of confidence that we're going to get a good product.
All right, with my 20 seconds left, I know earlier on, Mr. Sensenbrenner raised questions about the space station. You showed the book that you have about the benefits of the space station. So before I go and look at the book, what would you tell me is the greatest benefit that we're receiving from the space station?
The one greatest benefit?
Yeah, if you want to go on, it's up to the chairman how long you can go.
No, sir. I would say I will give you, and I will use the name Don Pettit. One of the greatest benefits from the International Space Station is it allows a guy like Don Pettit, who's on orbit right now, to talk to kids every day. Don Pettit is a modern Mr. Wizard, and he mesmerizes kids when he talks to them. And some of you have had an opportunity to be in on video teleconferences into classrooms. That one reason alone makes Space Station worth it.
Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bolden, welcome, and thank you for your service to our country. And I agree with you. The kids, there's nothing better than taking an astronaut through the schools and watching them, their faces light up, and it piques their interest. And math and science, as you know, is so important. And so thank you and your astronauts for what they do. I had just a couple of questions on kind of the timeline for things and how this is going to go forward under the proposed budget for SLS and Orion. Your budget appears to be lower than what was appropriated for the program and well below the authorized amount. Yet the timeline does not change. And so my question is, do you really see that as a realistic expectation? And if so, where did the efficiencies come from that allow you to do that?
Well, we've gone to school on the Constellation program for one thing. So we had a great lessons learned session among the people who are now with SLS and MPCV, with the folk in the Constellation program before, as they phased out. Many of them are now SLS MPCV persons. We don't know for certain, the dates we've given. The 2017 date for an uncrewed test is pretty hard because that's dependent on design and manufacturing that's pretty much set in place. The 2021 crewed mission date could change. Bill Gerstenmaier and his folk are telling me we have a number of reviews. We have performance, cost, schedule reviews that are still to be done in this coming year that will allow us to make a better assessment and give us a better estimate of when the first crewed mission can be flown. But 2021 is a conservative date right now. For the first crew mission? For the first crewed mission.
And 2017 would be the first
2017 is the first uncrewed test of the integrated vehicle. What hopefully you all are excited about is 2014, 2 years from now, we are going to fly Orion. It's going to be it is a Lockheed Martin run test at our request, but they have chosen a Delta IV to put Orion on and send it into 2 highly elliptical orbits that will allow it to make a reentry as it would be doing if it were coming back from the moon or an asteroid. And our plan is for it to have a successful intact reentry and recovery. It will buy down significant risk from the Orion vehicle that we won't later have to do.
And so then prior to 2021, in terms of human spaceflight, excuse me, we'll have to rely essentially on the Russians and the Chinese. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay.
If we are able to continue the progress that we're making right now with the commercial crew program, and Congress does agree to fund at the level that the President has asked for this year, we will be no later than 2017 in having an American capability to take astronauts to the International Space Station and other low Earth orbit destinations. There is a possibility that if we are funded at the level requested, that could be accelerated, but that, again, the 2017 time is an estimate based on, what we saw in working with.
So the 2017, then it would be fair to say that prior to 2017, we'll have to rely on the Chinese and the Russians.
I wish I could say differently, but
yeah,
we will rely on the Russians.
I wish you could too.
Yes.
Is the plan to go back to the moon or just orbit the moon and then try to hop on an asteroid? I mean, what is the vision here?
Congressman, the plan right now is the first destination for humans is an asteroid in 2025. The ultimate destinations for humans is the Martian environment, whether that's landing on a moon of Mars or landing on the Martian surface, is the mid-2030s. But as the President even says himself, you got to walk, crawl before you can get there. And so the asteroid is an intermediate step in getting to Mars. It is possible that we could put some rovers that are presently being developed and tested at the Johnson Space Center. We could put them on the moon and run tests with them. But so what we do between now and the first crewed mission in 2021, 2025 is still in work.
Well, that'd be very interesting to watch. I got 30 seconds. I know that you're going to have multiple companies participating in this commercial space flight, but only one at the end of the day is going to be picked. Is that correct?
Congressman, again, I hate to use the term hope. My plan is that we will have a minimum of 2 American companies that are capable of providing transportation to low Earth orbit, to the International Space Station, because that gives us reliable, redundant, routine access to space from an American capability.
And what would be the time frame on that?
2017 right now, and that, again, need to be certain that we understand that the 2017 date is forecast on, or based on fully funding the President's request for commercial crew, which to some may seem like an increase, but it's actually saying we really meant $850 million is what we need to get us to 2016, 2017. And I think I said it, but somebody has told me I should make sure every member of the committee understands we are only dependent on the Russians for transport to the International Space Station. We have no bilateral activities with China, in case I was
Well, that's a good point,
distinction
to make. I see my time has expired. Thank you so much, Mr. Bolden.
Charlie, I'm going to hold you to that 2030 deal. I'll be 106.
Mr. Chairman, I told you, don't give up. You know, we have had, my wife and I lived in Japan for 2 years, and we actually talked with some young ladies who were 120.
Young ladies?
Ladies. I'm just, yes, sir. There is hope.
Okay, thank you. Chair recognizes a fine gentleman from California, very patient, Mr. Rohrabacher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank General Bolden for a fine briefing that I had yesterday. And for the record, Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure that I again mention, and Representative Fudge helped me bring up the issue of cryogenic propellant storage and transfer as a really a vital technology. Yes, and I was very satisfied with our conversation and discussion yesterday as to the importance of that technology and recognition of that. Let me just mention, before I get into some of the transportation issues and space station and such, there was a article I saw in the news, and I get my news on the internet now. You know, I just bang. You know, what's the headline news? And asteroid headed toward the world. Okay, and that's what it said. So I went, my gosh, an asteroid's headed toward the world, and it was the same asteroid that we've been known about. Then they just declared that as it swings around the second time, again, people realized and have stated for the record that we don't know what Earth's gravity is going to do to the actual course of that asteroid. Now, in the NASA budget, we do have continued money for detection of objects that could hit the Earth. And that's an important thing that I've been trying to talk about for a long time, and I'm glad that's still recognized. But there is still, and Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that this is a very important point, and that is we still do not have a plan in place that if that asteroid is indeed shown to be off course, its course is altered and it's going to hit the world and cause billions of dollars of damage and maybe millions of lives lost, we still do not have in place the plan of how to deflect one of these. And I think that it behooves us that maybe we should pay attention and just, yeah, it might not happen for 100 years or 1,000 years, or it could happen tomorrow. So I would hope that we pay a little attention to that, and at least we have kept in a shrinking budget the money for detection of these. At least we can tell our people they can pray and say, you know, what do we do about this asteroid about ready to destroy our civilization? Well, we can pray about it. But now on to some other things. I also, in order to maintain our leadership, I would hope that we maintain a good relationship, whether it's on the issue I just described or on other NASA missions, whether it's deep solar missions, exploratory missions, or whatever. We're going to have to work with our allies and partners. And yet we are now withdrawing from the joint Mars programs and several other international partnerships with the European Space Agency. What's that going to do? I said, what, 2016 Mars Trace Gas Orbiter and the 2018 Mars rover programs. We both backed out of those. What's this going to do to our ability to be reliable partners? And partnership is so important for success as we have a shrinking budget.
Congressman, our international partnerships and international collaboration are key, and they have been stressed by the President since he came in office. It's a part of our international space policy, our national space policy, and we have not stepped away from our European friends. I have asked John Grunsfeld, the head of my Science Mission Directorate, to put together a team to look at how we restructure the robotic Mars exploration program so that we accomplish the objectives that were set out by our joint European-American discussions on ExoMars that fill the priorities for the decadal survey, the planetary decadal survey, but also support our efforts toward human exploration of Mars. So that is in work. He is now assigned Orlando Figueroa, a former NASA employee. Some refer to him as a Mars czar. To take the leadership in formulating a strategy that we hope to bring to the appropriations committees and to this committee in time for appropriations work this spring.
As you're fully aware, General, I am very concerned that we have committed ourselves to this new mega rocket transportation system, which may, I think, siphon money away from other projects that are vital, and maintaining our reliability with our European partners is vital to the success of our future missions. And if we end up, in order to build this big rocket that may or may not succeed 10 years down the road, if we end up putting ourselves in jeopardy with these other type of things, whether we're talking about cooperation or other type of projects that we need to do, then we haven't really done a good service for our whole space effort. But I rely on your judgment, and as we have all said, we are grateful for your service to the country.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, General.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Costello, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman and Administrator Bolden, I had hoped to be here earlier but got tied up. Got a couple of brief questions. One, I'd like to refer to a statement that was recently made by the ASAP panel. They made the following statement in its minutes from a recent meeting, and I quote, "What is the purpose of the commercial space program? Is it to transport humans to the ISS? Is it to nurture a commercial space industry? Or is it something in between?" The ASAP believes there is now a sea change in the objective to be one of the supporting industry's capability to deliver national economic benefit. If we're going to ask the U.S. taxpayers to invest in this program, I think that it is necessary that we're absolutely clear on what the objective is of the administration. One, I would ask you, do you agree with the statement made by the ASAP?
I do.
And two, what can you explain the primary objective of the administration?
Sure. Joe Dyer and the members of the ASAP and I have had this discussion, particularly with my senior leadership. The objective of the international of the commercial crew program originally was to service the International Space Station, and that is still a primary objective for us. When we were funded at the level of $406 million in the FY12 budget, it caused us to slip the expected delivery date of a commercial capability to, we hope that we can be no later than 2017. But what it did was it put us in a posture that we are not guaranteed programmatically that we can have a commercial capability in time to support the International Space Station. So it means that by default, the Congress and the administration have agreed that we are going to develop a commercial capability for the benefit of the American economy, and it will serve other purposes, but it may not make it in time to serve the International Space Station. And that is why I keep emphasizing the critical importance of fully funding the President's request for commercial crew, because I cannot afford to have the gap increase from now until 2017, even farther out. It is a programmatic risk that we have incurred by going to this strategy that we're on now, not a safety risk. So I do want to make sure that everybody understands that. There is no safety risk, no increase in our risk to safety to the crews by going with a change strategy. The risk is in programmatics. Until I can get someone under contract and hold their feet to the fire, as we have had this discussion all day, I can't guarantee a date of delivery. I can never guarantee a date, but I sure can get closer when we enter into a contract, and that's where I want to get.
Let me ask you about NASA's involvement in the next generation of the air traffic control system. As you know, I chaired the aviation subcommittee, and I'm the ranking member there now. How effective, in your opinion, has NASA been in working with the FAA to move NextGen further to implementation?
I am proud to say we have been incredibly effective. If you ask the industry, specifically Continental Airlines, United Airlines, Southwest Airlines, who have flown in test, particularly in the en route transportation changes that are coming with NextGen, they will tell you they see results already that have resulted in millions of dollars of savings in fuel cost just by implementing some of the systems that we have developed. Being able to do direct descent, direct ascent to a cruise altitude has changed dramatically the cost of fuel for the airline industry.
And when you say that we have developed, are you talking about NASA?
We are in collaboration with the FAA. Most of the work on the NASA part in the en route, the traffic management portion that you're addressing,
right,
is done at Ames and the Langley Research Centers. That is our primary focus, and that's what we're bringing to the team. It's a DoD, FAA, NASA team trying to do this, and so we've delivered as best we can with the funding we have our parts of the traffic management portion.
Last question: the proposed budget before us. In your opinion, what will NASA look like with the proposed budget today in the year 2020?
Oh, NASA, in the year 2020, we talk about this a lot. With the budget that we have today, if we are able to demonstrate that we can accomplish the plans that we have presented, you members of the Congress will have much more confidence in us, and you're going to increase my budget by the time we get to 2020. And I think you will see increased spending in aeronautics research. You're going to see totally different types of airplanes being designed because we'll have a large-scale test bed for commercial and cargo transportation. You won't hear NASA talking about commercial crew because that will have been turned over to the private enterprises, and that will not be in my budget. It'll be a line item for purchase of crew service for transportation. I won't be developing it. It'll be industries. You'll see us wanting more money so that we can go to places farther away than Mars because we're confident that we're going to make it to an asteroid in 2025, and we're confident we're going to put humans in the Martian environment. And my granddaughter is going to be pressing on somebody that she then wants to take humans to a far more distant planet. And I don't say that with any facetiousness at all. With the budget that we have in place, with the vision that the President has allowed us to present for him, that's what 2020 is going to be.
I thank you, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes a very patient gentleman from Alabama, my friend Mo Brooks. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bolden, you have said that NASA has made some tough budget decisions. As we ponder that statement for a moment, let me emphasize some facts. While in FY11, NASA's budget was $18.4 billion, in FY12 it looks like it's going to be $17.77 billion. In FY13, requesting a cut of $60 million to $17.7 billion. At the same time, in FY11, federal government spending went up $141 billion, an increase, while we're looking at cuts for NASA. And then we have a presidential budget that seeks to increase spending by $200 billion, from $3.6 to $3.8 trillion. And so I'm curious as to why NASA is having to absorb this cut atmosphere in the context of a presidential budget that increases spending by more than $200 billion. But having said that, with respect to the human spaceflight FY13 budget request, it appears that those decisions targeted the Space Launch System and Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle program for budget cuts, while doubling the commercial crew budget over FY 2012's $406 million appropriated levels to $829.7 million, well above the authorized levels. Last fall, you announced an agreement among NASA, the White House, and Congress on the top priorities for NASA over the next 5 years. Space Launch System and Orion were stated as top priorities on the list. Please explain why, just a few months later, NASA seems to have already changed its priorities, again favoring commercial crew transport above development of the Space Launch System and those systems required for deep space exploration.
Congressman, the budget we supported, supports an ambitious exploration program, as we have always said. And you've said it's difficult times, so we had to make some difficult decisions. The three priorities that you mentioned are collaborative. They go together. They don't stand alone. And that was well thought out. Those priorities are SLS and MPCV for exploration, supported by a robust technology development program. I don't quite have the robust technology development program in place yet. ISS sustainment beyond 2015 to at least 2020. I cannot support ISS if I don't have a commercial crew and cargo capability, so that's vital. And then the James Webb Space Telescope to open vistas to our universe that we've never done before. They all go together. James Webb will help us with our exploration. Commercial crew will make it possible for me to take the money that I'm spending now and helping them develop that capability to put it on exploration and on the subsequent pieces of the evolvable heavy lift launch system. We still have pieces to add, and I can only do that if I free myself up from the cost of paying the Russians $450 million a year for access to space. So they go together. If you isolate any one of them, then the agreement that the President made with the Congress falls apart, and none of the priorities get accomplished.
Okay, let me get to a follow-up question then. The 2010 NASA Authorization Act, and I emphasize 2010, authorizes $2.6 billion for the Space Launch System and other necessary support for FY 2013, yet the President's FY 2013 request is $1.3 billion, or roughly half, for Space Launch System, attributing the decrease to a diversion of approximately $405 million to a new account entitled Exploration Ground Systems. What percentage of this $1.3 billion, which is half of what was expected back in 2010 with the Authorization Act, what percentage of that $1.3 billion does NASA plan to actually use for direct development of the Space Launch Vehicle?
Congressman, I don't have a calculator with me, so I will take action to make it for the record to give you the answer on the percentage. But as we tried to explain before, we're doing parallel development of the ground.
Well, do you have a range? If you can't give an exact percentage,
I will take it for the record. I don't. My brain's tired, and I don't even know how to do the percentage thing right now.
May I infer from that it's clearly not 100%, that it's something less than that? Well, I'm asking what percentage of the $1.3 billion that you're asking for Space Launch System does NASA plan to use for development of the Space Launch Vehicle?
Oh, the amount of money that is an easy answer. 100% of the funds shown for vehicle development goes to vehicle development.
And that's the $1.3 billion.
Reason, and I think that's the $1.3 billion. Right. The reason that you do not see 1.9, as you saw before, is because that we made a bad assumption. We assumed that everyone would know that we had to develop ground systems in order to have a place for a vehicle to fly. That it didn't work that way. So we backed it out, and as I explained earlier, we now have two separate accounts that address ground systems. One is 21st Century Launch, that's mainly for multi-user facilities at the Kennedy Space Center, and then exploration ground systems that is totally for the SLS and MPCV. And I think the number is about $407 million for ground systems totally. And then, so what you see in the line item for SLS is strictly for vehicle development for the heavy lift launch vehicle.
All right, you've answered my question.
Yes,
just one closing remark. Mr. Bolden, I appreciate your service. I also appreciate what you've done for NASA and how NASA has represented America so well. It truly is American exceptionalism at its best. And I yearn for the day where we no longer have to thumb a ride with the Russians. And I yearn for the day when we can have a president that we can call the NASA president or the American exceptionalism president for space efforts and exploration like we had in the 60s and in the decades thereafter. And anything we can do to help make this president have that name, I'd love to be able to help you with.
Congressman, I yearn for the day when you and I will agree that we have that president.
Well, when he will quit cutting NASA, we might get to that day.
We will agree to disagree on how good he is. I'm very happy.
We yearn for the day when we just have a nominee. Okay, Charlie, you've been great. We thank you for your very valuable testimony and the members for their questions. And as you know, the members may have some questions to ask you and ask you to please answer those, and I know you will. Record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments from members. And Mr. Administrator, thank you for today. You are excused, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Thank you, Charlie.